if everyone could put if it's possible, if you can put your camera on, it's much nicer talking to a person than a picture or a name. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhute Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pasketyade Satarne. In honor of the holiday, we'll talk about the greatest gift, according to Krishna at least. Therefore, I've chosen this verse, Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, text number 38. Chapter is called Transcendental Knowledge. And I'll try to go slow enough so that Lavangalata Devidasi can translate properly. So if it sounds like I'm tired, it's not that I'm tired, but I'm just trying to go a little slower, which takes a great amount of conscious effort on my part. Ihi gyanena sadrisham pavitram iha vidyate tatsvayam yoga samsida kalenatmani vindati. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. In this world, there is nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge. Such knowledge is the mature fruit of all mysticism, and one who has become accomplished in the practice of devotional service enjoys this knowledge within himself in due course of time. Srila Prabhupada's purport. When we speak of transcendental knowledge, we do so in terms of spiritual understanding. As such, there is nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge. Ignorance is the cause of our bondage, and knowledge is the cause of our liberation. This knowledge is the mature fruit of devotional service. And when one is situated in transcendental knowledge, he need not search for peace elsewhere, for he enjoys peace within himself. In other words, this knowledge and peace culminate in Krishna consciousness. That is the last word in the Bhagavad Gita. So the text again, in this world, yanena tu tadaganam yesham nashitam atmanaha tesham adityavad jnanam nehi jnanena sadrisham vitramiha vidite tatsvayam yoga samsida kalenatmani vinati. In this world, there is nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge. Such knowledge is the mature fruit of all mysticism, and one who has become accomplished in the practice of devotional service enjoys this knowledge within himself in due course of time. Om Agyanatamanandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chaksur Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. The verses in the Bhagavad Gita, they don't stand separately. They're part of a continuous flow, which Srila Prabhupada has said in one book, is a continuous flow of nectar from Krishna to Arjuna. To understand any verse, we have to see in the context of all the other verses. So we know that Arjuna had a problem, that he didn't want to fight. At the same time, it was his duty to fight. So he was conflicted. He knew he was supposed to do his dharma, that was religious, but at the same time, he couldn't see how his dharma would be auspicious. Now, Krishna spends the third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita explaining to Arjuna about duty. And that the main duty at the end of the third chapter, as usual, is that one has to take shelter of Krishna. That without taking shelter of Krishna, then we're at the mercy of our senses and our mind. And therefore, intelligence, in the real sense of the term, is to inquire from Krishna or from his representatives what he wants us to do. Now, later on, in the 5th chapter, Krishna will explain that we have to not only work, but we should work at the same time in consciousness of Krishna. That consciousness of Krishna means that we'll actually take on the same qualities that Krishna has eventually. And at the end of the 5th chapter, Krishna explains that at least the beginning consciousness of Krishna is 3 different levels. One is to understand how Krishna is a proprietor. That with our intelligence, we can perceive within this universe that there's a supreme controller. Who that supreme controller is, we may not know. At least Krishna claims in Bhagavad Gita that he's the controller. So whether we call him Krishna or Mahavishnu or whoever we call him, Krishna is simply trying to establish that there is a supreme controller. And that as the supreme controller, he's also the supreme proprietor. Now that answers the question of why the eternal soul, ourselves, are situated in illusion. Because, basically speaking, the supreme proprietor has his private police force. Her name is Maya. She happens to be working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, eternally. And she's so enthusiastic about it, she has no time even to collect any profit or any money from it. She's too busy looking after the innumerable souls who are criminals in this world. And she's very expert. As it is said by Brahma-Vivarta, that just like if you, Maya, Krishna, Bahir, Mukha, Bhoga, Vancha, Tare, Nikatasta, Tare, Japatiya, Dare. It doesn't take much for Maya to go into action. She's quite alert. She obviously doesn't even sleep at night. Because as soon as we forget Krishna, then immediately she's there to put us into illusion. And the first thought of forgetting Krishna is simply to forget Krishna. And as soon as we forget Krishna, then we think we're on our own. We immediately go into the world of Maya. And in the world of Maya, at first everything's quite boring, because Maya really has nothing to offer. But she, at least at first, we don't know what Maya has to offer. And then Maya, as soon as we forget Krishna, Maya takes us on a tour of the material energy so we can choose. what part of the material energy we want to experience. Prabhupada once said that the conditioned soul has come to the material world to experience the material energy. It was always a question, not always, but sometimes the question arises, why, if the spiritual world is so blissful, everything is so wonderful there, why would the living entity come to the material world, which obviously has some defects? The Prabhupada once gave the example that a very rich man, he can enjoy anything he wants because he has so much money. But sometimes, out of curiosity, he may ask for some fried peanuts. Now, fried peanuts are not very elaborate. They're not a very sophisticated meal. But out of curiosity, he wants to see what that meal would taste like. So similarly, the conditioned soul, all souls are curious. That's the nature of reality for the soul. As long as we're conscious, we're going to be curious. As Krishna is curious, he wants to experience so many different types of happiness. So we're also being part and parcel of Krishna. We want to experience different varieties of happiness. So now we're experiencing the happiness of being an illusion. What it would be like to imagine ourselves to be somehow or another independent of Krishna and our own, or the center of attention, and personally enjoying ourselves. So in order to do that, we have to believe that I'm independent of Krishna. Everything is independent of Krishna. There is no Maya. There is no police force. I can actually steal. Well, not steal. The conditioned soul doesn't think he's stealing. He thinks he's acquiring. He's expanding. Therefore, Prahlad Maharaj has said, Pungsa striya maitune bhavan etam tayor hriday granti mahu ato griya kshetra sutapta vitera janasya moho yam ahang mameti. Generally, that expansion goes on because if we're going to be enjoying the material world, we generally have to enjoy with someone else. Krishna, he enjoys himself, but he gets more enjoyment in relationship to others, especially with Srimati Radharani and her girlfriends, but also with his mother and father, and with his friends, and with the cows. Krishna enjoys different relationships. So here in the material world, we want to also enjoy different kinds of relationships. The main relationship is called Romeo and Juliet, or as I sometimes say, there's Tarzan and Jane. There's also Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse. There are different varieties of the same theme. And everyone has come here to experience that theme. And of course, Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse, they also have associates. So does Tarzan and Jane. The monkeys, the elephants, they're all associates, friends, and family members. So here we want to enjoy the same thing. The only problem is that as soon as we want to enjoy those things, we have to enjoy them in illusion, namely identified with this body. And the other thing is that there are different types of enjoyment in the material world. There's enjoyment in the mode of ignorance, where one is very much covered over, which generally leads to the same kind of happiness, but in another species of life other than a human being. Or enjoyment in the mode of passion, where to get one drop of happiness, one has to sacrifice gallons of blood. And then there's enjoyment in the mode of goodness, trying to enjoy the temporary material nature, following the rules and regulations, living a relatively peaceful life, and then having to leave the body and go somewhere else. Maybe on vacation to the heavenly planets for some time. But after some time, one becomes curious again. What would be unrestricted material enjoyment beyond these rules and regulations, where basically speaking, at best, we simply become peaceful. And therefore, one generally falls into the mode of ignorance and passion again. So, here Krishna has explained that for the fortunate soul, Brahmande Brahmite Kon Bhagavanji, Guru Krishna Prasade Bhai, Bhakti Lata Beach. He becomes a little tired of, it's called Punak Punas Charvata Charvananam, chewing the chewed, and therefore he becomes somewhat interested in finding out, is there something that's different from the general material existence, either in goodness or in passion or in ignorance? One may try spiritual life. So for that, Krishna had advised Arjuna from the very beginning of the third chapter that, well, your problem is, basically speaking, that you've been in the material world for such a long time that you're subjected to the influence of illusion. And because you're an illusion, and because you're subjected to the influence of the senses, namely lust, and then greed, and then anger, which produces more illusion, more forgetfulness, more loss of intelligence. Therefore, because you're subjected to that, therefore you get confused. And instead of doing your duty, you do something else, and that is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Then you become more covered, and you identify more closely with your gross and subtle body. And the result is you don't know what's to be done or what's not to be done. Or the result is you believe that you're the body and that you become more subjected to the influence of the material modes of nature, until one becomes realized that actually this is the same thing I've been experiencing time and time again, and then one may take shelter again of the rules and regulations that Krishna has given. So, on the other hand, Krishna talks about transcendental knowledge. So transcendental knowledge begins from hearing about what reality is. Namely, the reality is that we're eternal. There's a Supreme Person, Krishna, and that we have an eternal relationship with him. And that our choice is either we're going to meditate on Krishna, we're going to perform activities to please him. Pleasing him means maybe at the beginning just to do what he requests that we do. To do what he requests what we do, under the guidance of his representatives, and then to do it to please him. And the result of that, Krishna said, Prabhupada writes in the 1857, is that we'll actually think about Krishna. That Krishna will not just be an idea, it'll be an experience. That if we actually experience Krishna, that means that we'll not only remember him, but we'll also experience or feel his presence, and Krishna is simply emanating prema. He simply exists in prema, only in prema, and endless varieties of love and bliss. And according to Bhagavad Gita, when we experience that bliss, as Krishna had said in the previous verse, then our ignorance is destroyed. Yanena tutad aganam, yesham nashitam atmanaha, yesham adityavaj jnanam, akashiti tatparam. However, one is enlightened with a knowledge by which nescience is destroyed, then his knowledge reveals everything, just like the sun lights up everything in the daytime. So what is that knowledge? Well, Krishna had summarized it very simply. First of all, to accept that we're Krishna's servants, and that we have no goal in life save and accept, act in Krishna consciousness just to satisfy Krishna. In other words, not to misidentify ourselves with anything gross or subtle in this world, but simply to identify ourselves as a servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna. As I said before, that's why we take initiation. Not to simply free ourselves from our sinful reactions, to donate our sinful reactions to our spiritual master. That's not why we take initiation. We take initiation to have the conception, to accept the conception that I'm the servant of Krishna's servant, and he's supposed to teach me how to become appropriate servant of everyone else, especially of the devotees. So that everywhere I look, every person I see, I simply think about how I can help them become or revive their relation with Krishna, or strengthen their relation with Krishna. Therefore, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, when he was asked what the essence of knowledge is, he said, Yari Deka Tarikaha Krishna Upadesh Amara Aigaya Guru Hana Tari Desh. That we only have one business. Very simple. We don't have to worry about having millions of different duties to do, even though we may have many things to do. But our main business, our principal business, is that whoever we meet, we should help them become conscious of Krishna. And it's not very difficult. If we don't know what else to say, we can simply say Hare Krishna. Just like Dhruva Maharaj, he was undoubtedly a great devotee, went through so much austerity, to the point that he had stopped breathing and stood on one leg, meditating on Lord Vishnu. And he had seen Prishnigarbha, Lord Vishnu, face to face. Now, Lord Vishnu had decided that he'd stay on this planet for another 40,000 years. And when it was time for him to leave, the Vishnu Dutas came in an airplane. But he was so much overwhelmed by ecstasy, he didn't know what to say. So he said, Hare Krishna. Typical devotee. If you don't know what to say, just say Hare Krishna. Similarly, when he was in another situation and he had tried to take revenge against the Yakshas for killing his brother Uttama, at one point it appeared that he was going to win and kill all the Yakshas. But the Yakshas were not ordinary personalities, they were great mystics. And therefore they produced what is said to be illusion, but obviously it was just illusion. It wouldn't be so important. But obviously their illusions were quite powerful. Therefore, Dhruva Maharaj saw on one side, huge tidal waves were coming, tsunamis were going to drown him. On the other side, wild beasts were coming to devour him. Another side, naked rakshashis and rakshashas were coming to kill him. Another side, poisonous snakes and other animals poisonous animals were coming to bite him. And above him, there were boulders and swords and lances falling on top of him. Now that was rather uncomfortable situation. As they say, he had nowhere to turn. So therefore he became a little bewildered. So the sages came and said, chant Hare Krishna. And indeed he chanted Hare Krishna. And by Krishna's mercy, he was able to chant so nicely that all the illusions went away. Therefore, in this age, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has requested us to chant Hare Krishna. But in order to chant Hare Krishna, as he says in the second verse of the Shikshastika prayer, Trinad api sunichena traiva sahishnuna amanina madedena kirtiniyak sadahari. One has to become humble. So that's part of transcendental knowledge. Now we've heard theoretically that we're 1/10,000th the size of the tip of your hand size. Now, if we realize that, obviously we'd be either embarrassed or extremely humble. It's very hard to be, for someone who's 1/10,000th the size of the tip of your hand size, to get too much attention or to want too much attention. But we can't just theoretically, if we try to imagine that I'm 1/10,000th the size of the tip of your hand size, it makes no sense to us because we don't even know who we are. Therefore, one of the ways of manifesting our relationship with Krishna is to chant Hare Krishna in the mood that I'm your eternal servant and you're very great, and however small I am, in comparison to you, I'm small. But due to our past activities, due to the fact we are Bali conscious rather than Krishna conscious, so many different things are going to be presented to us that's going to test our tolerance. That's going to test whether or not at that moment, either due to happiness in the material world or due to distress, we're going to take shelter of either the objects of happiness or we're going to try to avoid the objects of distress and forget about Krishna. Therefore, in Bhagavad Gita, in the second chapter, when Arjuna is asking about what the symptoms of a self-realized person are, the first thing Krishna says is that a self-realized person, he knows what's illusion and what's not illusion. Rajahiti Yada Kaman, Sarvan Partha Manogatan, Atmanyavatmana Tushta, Stita Pragyasta Tochite. One is not disturbed, what is it? When a man gives up all varieties of sense desire, which arise from mental speculation, and when his mind finds satisfaction in the self alone, he's said to be situated in perfect knowledge. In other words, there may be so many different possibilities that we can choose from, how to react to our circumstances. But we shouldn't forget Krishna. That our first go-to is, what does Krishna want me to do? And if we take shelter of Krishna, then the result will be that the other alternatives, which are arising from mental speculation, will not be affecting us. Now that takes some practice, but we can judge our practice according to the next verse. Ukeshu vamanagmanak, sukeshu vigatas priha, vita raga vayakroda, stita dhiramuni uchite. One who is not disturbed in spite of the threefold miseries, who's not elated when there's happiness, and is free from attachment, fear, and anger, is known as a sage of steady mind. Therefore, Srimad Bhagavatam is full of stories, not of people who became automatically Krishna conscious and lived a happy, peaceful life. As a matter of fact, the Bhagavatam is full of problems. There's no one in the Bhagavatam who lived a happy life from material standards. Everyone in the Bhagavatam simply went through one problem after another. But the difference is that they all took shelter of Krishna. And therefore their problems simply deepened their reliance upon Krishna. Whether the Pandavas were in the forest, whether they're in the castle, whether they're on the war field, they're always dependent upon Krishna. Whether Prahlad Maharaj was in school or on the lap of his father or talking to his schoolmates, he was always talking about Krishna. Now, as a result of that, Prahlad Maharaj didn't have a very happy family life. His father did not appreciate that Prahlad Maharaj tried to sell Hiranyakashipu a book. Hiranyakashipu undoubtedly would have ripped it up. Not a very nice relationship. Still, Prahlad Maharaj wouldn't give up his shelter of Krishna. Although he wanted to do, whatever he did was not out of enviousness of his father, it was out of genuine love and concern for his father. Similarly, whatever the Pandavas did was not out of enviousness of even Duryodhana and his brothers. It was simply out of love and concern for them. Not only concern and love for them, but for everyone. As Krishna has love and concern for everyone, so his devotees have love and concern. And therefore, despite whatever difficulties they're put into, that love and concern doesn't diminish as long as they take shelter of Krishna. And therefore, whatever they did had the element of tolerance because they didn't live in the material world. They lived with Krishna. Otherwise, it would not be possible for going through the austerities and the problems that Prahlad Maharaj went through unless he was living with Krishna. So we may not be on this level of Prahlad Maharaj or the Pandavas, or even Haridas Thakur, or even Lord Shiva. But these are examples for us to follow, because we have to follow some example. Now, in the material world nowadays, people believe that everything that they deserve, immediate gratification, they deserve unlimited sense gratification. And therefore, they believe there's no value of tolerance. They should simply gratify their senses, and anything that stands in their way should be eliminated. And even 20 years ago, I remember reading about how one man was at a stoplight and it turned red. Well, it turned green, and he didn't move. So the car in the back, started to honk his horn to try to wake the driver in the front, so he start moving his car, driving his car. But the man in the front became so agitated by hearing someone blaring his horn at him, he took a rifle and shot the man in the back. So that's an example of lack of tolerance. So that's unfortunately, it's not the only example of lack of tolerance. Nowadays, it's such, at least in some parts of the world, people they believe that there are multiple genders. There's no such thing as man and woman anymore. There are 71 or more possibilities of what gender you might be. And you're expected, people who are dealing with you, especially at a university, they're expected to know what gender you are. Because that would take a tremendous amount of discrimination to figure out 71 different genders. In any case, if you tell someone the wrong gender, that they're the wrong gender, it's called a microaggression. They become very disturbed. And because you microaggress them, you may lose your job. Because people cannot tolerate that you can't recognize one of the 71 possible genders that you may be in at that moment. So that's an example of lack of tolerance. Obviously, because they have no consideration that they have any duty in life other than to gratify their senses. Therefore, their only relation with others is how others will gratify their senses or won't gratify their senses or may disturb their senses. So life has become very complicated and will be increasingly more complicated as people become more and more microaggressed. Lack of tolerance, even the smallest problem, makes them agitated. So for a devotee, our only shelter is to somehow or another become convinced that we should take shelter of Krishna. That I'm not this body, and whatever demands this body has, I should be careful that I tolerate them, and at the same time, I fix my mind upon Krishna. And fixing the mind upon Krishna also means to see how others are instruments for Krishna. That it's not Krishna only with Krishna as the flute and a peacock feather. Krishna is also manifested in the hearts of all living entities in this world. And is especially manifested as his instruments, the devotees, who are serving his desires. They're especially manifestations of Krishna by taking shelter of Krishna's internal energy. Therefore, one has to learn how to appreciate them, how they're serving Krishna under the spiritual energy, because then one will actually be under the protection of the spiritual energy by understanding things properly. And at the same time, one should understand that whatever good I'm doing in devotional service, especially, is simply a gift of the internal energy of Krishna, given to me because I'm following the instructions of Krishna from his representatives in disciple succession. And therefore, what I believe sometimes to be my activities are actually not my activities, they're activities of the internal energy of Krishna. And when I work under the internal energy of Krishna, I can feel blissful and tolerate the problems of material existence. And I can help others feel blissful and tolerate the problems of material existence. But as soon as I think that I'm great and others is something other than Krishna's instruments, then the material energy will the material energy will separate our consciousness from the protection of Krishna's internal energy, and therefore it won't be possible to have a proper loving relationship with anyone in the material world. And without a loving relationship based upon Krishna consciousness, I can neither be happy nor know how to make anyone else happy. Therefore, as we can see, when people are not able to have nice relationships with others based upon appreciation of their relation with Krishna, therefore people become interested in external accumulation of things. They want more cars, they want more followers, they want more wealth, and ultimately they want to escape from all these botherations and go up into the Himalayas and smoke ganja. Liberation. But the whole idea is somehow or another, these external things will make me happy because there's no relationship that I have with anyone based on Krishna consciousness. So no relationship can make me happy. So the only way I want to become happy is to imagine that by the accumulation of wealth and followers, personal influence, up into the point of liberation, that will make me happy. But if one can actually take shelter of Krishna and appreciate the devotees, then these other things will not. We won't, then our attachment to these things, they'll diminish. Therefore, we'll only want pure devotional service, as Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said. And then we can very happily take shelter as one of the atoms at Krishna's lotus feet. And we take shelter of Krishna's lotus feet, that knowledge, or as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, about entering into the mysteries of understanding him, then we'll see that however humble I may become because of my very small being, existence, and however in relation to the all great Krishna, but when I discover Krishna, I'll find out that as he's great in everything, he's also greatly humble. That however humble I might become, he's even more humble. However affectionate I may feel for Krishna, he's overwhelmed with affection and love. As a matter of fact, affection and love and bliss and everything else that's auspicious, they're all accompanied by humility. Just like a man may be probably gives the example of one prime minister in England, and very powerful prime minister. England at that time was ruling the world. I think it was Prime Minister Glasgow or someone. And one man had an appointment with the prime minister. So the secretary came out and said, the prime minister is busy right now. He'll see you as soon as possible. So an hour went by, and still the man was waiting for his appointment with the prime minister. So he decided to peek in and see what the prime minister was doing. So he peeked into his office and saw the prime minister was on his hands and legs, and on his back was his grandchild. And his grandchild was playing, the prime minister was playing the part of a horse, and his grandchild was driving around the room. So here's a man who's practically ruling the whole world, most influential man on the planet at that time. And yet for his grandchild, who's taking the part of a horse out of affection. So therefore, one devotee, he says that actually, I don't worship Krishna, I worship Nanda Maharaj, because Krishna is a little baby, he's crawling around in his courtyard. So Krishna is so affectionate, so appreciative, that when Pundarik Vidyanidhi had taken Gadad Pandit to, well, actually Pundarik Gadadhar Pandit was taken by a devotee to see Pundarik Vidyanidhi. Who was it that took Gadadhar Pandit to see Pundarik Vidyanidhi? Does anyone remember? In any case, this devotee was telling Gadadhar Pandit that Pundarik Vidyanidhi was a great devotee. Oh, it was Mukunda. Mukunda. So Mukunda took Gadadhar Pandit to see Pundarik Vidyanidhi. And Gadadhar Pandit was actually quite surprised, because Pundarik Vidyanidhi, who was supposedly a great devotee, was sitting on a silk bed, and he's dressed in silk, and he had servants fanning him, and he was smoking a hookah. You know what a hookah is? Hookah is a pipe that generally you put intoxicants into, and then you smoke the intoxicants through water, so they're purified. You get purified intoxicants. If you don't know about it, it's all right. You don't have to investigate it very much. But needless to say, that Gadadhar Pandit was quite surprised to see the opulence that this supposed great devotee was immersed in. And within his mind, he thought, how is it possible that this person is a great devotee? Mukunda understood Gadadhar Pandit's mind, and he recited one verse, Aho Bhakti Swapacho, Aho Bhakti, that how wonderful it is that Putana came disguised as a mother in order to poison Krishna. And Krishna accepted Putana and sucked her breast, which was full of poison, sucked out her life air, killed her, but then gave her a position as one of his mothers in the spiritual world. Who could be more merciful than such a person? Giving the highest benediction to someone who came with the lowest motivation, simply because she offered a little service. So these are examples of how kind Krishna is. And Maya also is very kind, because if we turn away from Krishna, then Japati Itare, Maya will slap us. Not that she enjoys slapping us. She has plenty of people to slap. But she enjoys trying to stop us from our nonsense so we can turn our face back to Krishna. Now, if Maya slaps us and we try to slap her back, that's the wrong reaction. She's trying to help us. So then we'll find out that she'll slap us even harder, trying to wake us up. But those who have no knowledge, they think that Maya is doing it because she doesn't love us. But actually, it's out of kindness that she's slapping us to wake us up. So those who know that, they'll appreciate Maya. She's trying to help us become Krishna conscious, and they'll react properly by turning their face to Krishna again. And those who are unfortunate, they'll either feel distress and have nowhere to turn to except to take shelter of someone who also is trying to slap Maya back, and therefore simply finding themselves andaya tandera upagiyama nanas tepisha tandra urudami bara, simply being blind, but if they take shelter of another blind person, they'll simply fall into the ditch. But if they take shelter of a person, Naisham Mahagnir Purusha, Naisham Tir Ukramangrim, Srisho Yanarta, Pagavo Yanartam, Naisham Matis Tavada Rukramangrim. If they take shelter of a person who's taking shelter of Krishna, then they'll get real shelter. And then they won't be affected by their material circumstances anymore, because they'll be in a different world, in a spiritual world. There's only happiness and love and appreciation, and not this enviousness caused by our lack of proper association and lack of proper understanding. So this is just a little bit part of the knowledge that Krishna is explaining in Bhagavad Gita here. So I'll stop there and thank you. Wish you a Hare Krishna. And ask if there's any questions or comments. Parthasarthi Das.
Thank you so much, Guru Maharaj, for the class. Yes, I took note of a few points. First of all, I have this question for ages. What's the difference between Trinata Pitsunishana, Taror, Iva, and like you mentioned, but some devotees say Api? What is the difference?
Api Sunichena Tri Avi Sahishnuna Manina Parananina. P generally is just a filler. I don't know what the different translations are. I'm not even so sure if I said the right Sanskrit. But generally, the translation is that one should be humbler than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and ready to offer our respects to others. In such a humble state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. So I don't know. I don't have the verse in front of me, but what exactly where a piece fits or doesn't fit in, but I think the general understanding is there. Humility,
Because
tolerance.
some devotees say api and some devotees say va. Anyway, regarding to this, you mentioned about being tolerant, and I wonder sometimes when we introduce someone into Krishna conscious, we are very eager and we very keen to follow up with this person and cultivate this person, and we are very tolerant and very compassionate. We have a lot of empathy for this person because we are interested in this person to become Krishna conscious. But what about when we are associating between devotees? Sometimes I observe that sometimes there is a lack of empathy, lack of compassion, lack of tolerance between devotees. And then what for me, what's the point of cultivating someone if we are not having healthy relationship like you mentioned? How can we develop this sense of belonging?
Don't forget
And
Parthasarthi. Don't forget you're being
oh,
translated. So
I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry. Yeah. So I don't know if Mataji got all this, or I have to repeat. Is he
I think
okay? Or?
I think
Yes,
I
Prabhu,
think
I'm fine. Please continue. Everything is okay.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry about that. So the whole point is don't forget about Krishna. And what about when we say regarding to this point, sometimes I have the feeling that I don't know if it's my mind or if it's true, but I can see that some devotees are not associating properly in a healthy way, and sometimes they are not even considered. Some devotees who are there in the movement for some time, it's more the interest in cultivating new people, the
I think
interest in
Parthasarthi,
new.
I think I've understood the question.
Yeah,
I don't
okay,
have to hear the whole story.
yeah,
I think we all have.
okay. So, sorry.
The no, it's our duty to serve Krishna. Even if
Yeah,
others aren't serving Krishna, it's our duty to serve Krishna. So it's not that we negate our intelligence, but we look for good examples. However small they may be, we look for good examples. And when we see bad examples, then we think about how, if we can help make it into a good example, if we have some power to do it. So that's we have plenty of service to do. We don't have to worry about whatever others are doing. That's not within our control. We should just worry about what we're doing, where our consciousness is. If we live in a world where everything is bad, that means our consciousness is probably wrong. If we live in a world where we see the good and we see the bad, and when we see the bad, we see if we can help rectify the bad, and if not, we leave it up to Krishna. If Krishna doesn't want to use this as an instrument to help others rectify their misbehavior, we leave it up to Krishna too, because Krishna has not empowered us or designated us to serve them in that way. In any case, we're all Krishna's eternal servants, and sooner or later, everyone will, especially the devotees who are in the society now, they'll learn their lesson. They're not waiting for us necessarily to teach them. Krishna will arrange it for them. But we should always have a nice attitude towards the devotees, because in any case, although they may not be perfect, but Krishna sees whatever good they're doing and magnifies it unlimitedly, and therefore suggests that we try also find the good and magnify it. And when we see the things that are not so good, we should do what's within our power, within our authority to help rectify it, but not with attachment. We're not trying to make devotees for ourselves. We're trying to help people revive their devotion to Krishna. Otherwise, we may be very empowered, we may not be so empowered, but we have to humbly serve others to the best of our ability.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
Anything else? All right.
May I ask a question?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Maharaj, if my superior does not have a clear direction, does not understand strategy or anything else, in other words, if I'm smarter than my superior, what should I do?
Well, if you think you're smarter than your superior, then I don't know how you think they're superior. In what way are they superior? If you think you're smarter than them. And even if you think you're smarter than your superior, if they're officially a superior, still we have to inquire from Krishna what they want, what he wants us to do. One of the things he doesn't want us to do is to get too proud and think that I'm constitutionally superior to anyone. That as soon as I think I'm superior to others, which I may be as an instrument of Krishna, but as soon as I take the attitude that I'm superior, and if it's not within the attitude of service, then the result is I'll get into a conflict. The whole material world is in a conflict because everyone thinks they're superior to each other. No one recognizes the good qualities in others. No one recognizes that they're servants on behalf of Krishna to others. And therefore everyone is, under the modes of material nature, ready to fight with each other. So even my superior, if they're actually my superior, then I have to very humbly consider what I should do on behalf of Krishna in relationship to that person. So that's not one answer. There may be varieties of things that Krishna may want us to do. There may be varieties of circumstances. But in any case, I always remain the servant of everyone, my superiors, my equals, and my inferiors. I'm always the servant. As Srila Prabhupada was giving a lecture in Stockholm one time, and he was talking about the 4 varnas and ashrams, how the Brahmins are superior, the topmost, they give knowledge to others. So at the end of the lecture, someone asked Srila Prabhupada that which of these 4 varnas are you? You must be the Brahmin caste. So Prabhupada said, no. He said, I'm 5th class because I'm a servant of everyone. So as servants of the servant of the servant of Krishna, as trying to develop that attitude at least, then if we take that attitude in dealing with anyone, including those who are superiors, then we can, of course, if someone doesn't have any direction, is misguided, then we don't follow them. That would be foolish. Blind following, Prabhupada writes in the Bhagavad Gita, blind following and absurd inquiries are condemned. One should not only hear submissively, but one should get a clear understanding through submission, service, and inquiry. So we're not blind followers, but we're also not blind criticizers. If someone doesn't have a clear direction, we don't follow them. We're trying to get a clear direction. That's the whole idea. One should not only be submissive, but one should get a clear understanding through submission, service, and inquiry. So, if we're doubtful whether they have a clear direction or not, then we have to ask someone superior to them. We're not supposed to, if they're actually our superiors, we're not supposed to take the role of superior to them. That will lead to a conflict. We have to approach their superior and explain the difficulty we have. And if no one can help us, then we humbly keep quiet and decide, we take shelter of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, and try to understand, we pray to Krishna to help us get a clear understanding of what he wants us to do. And if we're sincere, then Krishna will give us some direction himself personally. If no one else can give us direction, if we're humble, submissive, and investigate, especially Prabhupada's books, and inquire from others, our equals, then Krishna within the heart will help us get a clear understanding of which direction to go in. Is that all right?
Thank you so much, Maharaj. Perfect. Perfect. Thank you.
I think we're going to stop there. Maybe we'll take one last question from Parthasarathi. Prabhu.
Just a quick one, Guru Maharaj. Thank you so much for your kindness. Service with a wrong attitude or some material motivations can also give some benefit.
Yeah, any service to Krishna gives some benefit. Depends how much benefit you want. Anything we do will get a reciprocation, which will encourage us. So there's no reason, we don't lose anything by having the positive attitude. And we don't really gain that much by having a negative attitude. So if we want to do good, we want to work for the best possible benefit we can get, and we know we should change our attitude, why not do it? Why not have the best attitude possible? Why should we cheat ourselves and cheat others by having less than the best? Happy holidays. Chant Hare Krishna, be happy.
Thank you,
Hare
Guru
Krishna.
Maharaj.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
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 Ki jai. Gaur
Jai.
Premanande.
Hare
Hari
Hari
Bol.
Hari
His
Bol.
Holiness
Hare
Prahladananda
Krishna.
Swami Maharaj ki.
Jai.
Jai.
Thank you, Lavanga Lata Devidasi.